When I walk in, every ancestor move. Every cell in my body got an ancient groove. I ain't searching for truth, I embody the proof. You look at me, you see the lineage. Every obstacle shift when I rise in them.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome back to another round of my Patriot Report Live. I am the bridge connecting the next generation to federal contracting. I am Vertwan Hill. And with me, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ambassador of Peace. And if you don't know who he is by now, you might want to ask ChatGPT, Mr. Walter Cotton III. Mr. Cotton, how you doing this lovely Thursday?
I'm well. I am well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
yes,
I had
sir.
to pause and think, man, because I believe that something's out of order, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have a sober read of the Constitution that says certain things need to be happening right now. The executive branch needs to be doing certain things. Otherwise, they would be considered operating in an illegal fashion. They'd be operating outside of the bounds of the Constitution. And that would suggest that the people's representatives, right, that would be the House and the Senate, would be doing the right thing and reining this action in. But I'm not seeing that either out of either of those two groups. And it's just perplexing. It's like, I mean, WTF, I'm asking. You know, we've got men and women that are sitting in the fog of war in harm's way. And based on, again, the sober read of the constitutional authority, they're supposed to have been given an understanding that they have 30 days and they'll be withdrawn, they'll be coming home. And, you know, families should be celebrating the fact that, you know, their husbands and loved ones are coming home. But that's not happening. That's not happening right now. And it's just got me perplexed. I'm wondering what's really happening.
Yeah. Okay, now you said something. You said, you know, when there's some illegal actions being taken place. Now we know when there's something illegal happening in you know, regular everyday life, there's a consequence. You know, if you do something unlawful, it's a consequence. But there seems to be, first, what are the consequences for not following the Constitution in the perspective of what's going on in the hierarchy, if you will?
What are the consequences? Well, very simply put, the Congress has the ability to put guardrails on the executive branch to minimize the executive branch's ability to produce any more harm, to produce any more policies, programs, or strategies, and to perform any more illegal actions. So that's the first remedy, right? If one believes that this administration did not have the authority to disturb the people's house in the way that they did, and that this bait and switch action that is suggesting that we're going to get, you know, $1 billion from the taxpayers to contribute to the not construction. I mean, like, listen, you know, we got to stop playing semantics here, right? You know, we're a nation of laws, right? We're a nation that's based on the rule of law. You can't violate the law at any level. And if you're willing to violate the law at the highest office in the land, how do you expect the citizens to respond and react? And so the unintended consequences of doing nothing in this situation is significant. And so the true patriots in this nation are coming together, and we're raising our voice, and we're saying to our representatives, stop. No more. No more. This is ridiculous, right? You can't continue to piss on our head and tell us it's raining because, you know, you got seduced by the cult of personality, right? You know, if I'm the great deal maker in chief, I'm not putting you in a position where you've got north of $50 billion of taxpayers' money that has been expended on producing an outcome that was worse than the situation you sought to remedy, right? I mean, let's look at the Middle East situation as it is, right? You know, the stuff that's not being reported to us is the damage that's been done to the military bases over there. Billions of dollars worth of investment is going to have to be made in order to reshore, in order to reestablish those footprints. I think that there's a question that we should ask today as taxpayers, which is whether or not we even need to reestablish those bases. I think that there's a opportunity for the adults in the nation to come to the table and maybe take another look at our relationship in this warmongering approach that we're taking. You know, is this time for us to let peace be our guide, and not peace through destruction, right? But peace through cooperation, right? Peace through generosity, right? Is this a time for us to take a closer look at what the guiding principles and forces are in this nation? I think that it may be.
Now, this was the thing that popped in my mind. I was reading that, you know, some of the negotiation points in this conversation to essentially add it and what's going on, the conflict with Iran, was that we wanted access to their uranium. So to me, it seems like this really is just being able to get access to some very refined or unrefined uranium that they could that we essentially be able to utilize. Do you think that that's
no, and I want to make sure that you're clear on that, because you know the uranium that they're talking about is the stuff that fuels nuclear power plants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the stuff that is the foundation for nuclear weapons,
mm-hmm.
right? And so you know we've got our own uranium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, we've got our own nuclear assets and stockpile. The real issue here is they are trying to scare America into believing that we need to do everything possible to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear authority, because that's going to represent a death nail to the United States, a death nail to the world. Well, you know what? We've seen this game before. Remember, there was a guy by the name of Kim Jong-il, right, in Korea, right, who was pursuing his nuclear ambitions. And the scare there was, oh, we can't let him get a nuclear weapon because if he does, he's going to use it. And that hasn't turned out to be the case, right? It's turned out we've been able to utilize diplomatic approaches, right, towards maintaining balance in that area. I believe that we can accomplish the same here. And so we've got to look at, you know, who is motivating us to take this most aggressive and most expensive approach to producing what only can be achieved through diplomatic channels. And that's where I, as the ambassador of peace, am having conversations with all of the patriots that are in this nation to say, hey, listen, an error does not become a mistake unless we don't correct it.
Do you think that's like, well, do you believe that that's just like the culture in America? Because that was where we was, I don't want to say bred, but we was trained to pretty much essentially think patriotism. Yeah, wars. This is how we win. This is how we're the superpower in America. Do you think that's just a idealism that was imprinted on us versus saying, well, you could attract more, you know, bees with honey than your pollen than, you know, with BS?
That, you know, I think that is a media driven and a social media driven narrative. But the reality on Main Street and my street is that we have a kinder, gentler nation. And so if we test these premises that we're seeing in the, you know, comments on Substack and, you know, your favorite social media TikTok personality, if we're testing the premises that are coming out of our mainstream media, against what's happening in our community, we see something very different, right? We don't see a polarized America, right? We don't see a MAGA contention against the black contention. We don't see that when we go and look at when we realize what's happening in our communities. But if we allow ourselves to be hypnotized by the mainstream media, hypnotized by social media, we put ourselves in a position where Mr. Global, right, the invisible hand of big business, is conditioning us to behave and react in ways that is unnatural to our actual beliefs. It's unnatural to the way we organically feel. And so I'm encouraging every true patriot that's within the sound of my voice is to test the theory, right? Test the realism of what you believe, right? Walk up to your fellow citizen and smile at him or her and say, how you doing? Right? And say, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York mountains, from the redwood forest, I could keep going, right? We have a great nation that's in crisis, and we have a opportunity that requires us to take urgent and important action right now. And the urgent and important action that's needed is we need to communicate to our representatives that they need to quarantine this executive branch. And I am not sorry to say that, right? I am looking to make America safe so that my daughter and her children's children and their children's children have the opportunity for the kind of liberty that I had the chance to enjoy. But if we don't stop these shenanigans that are not in America's best interest, we could be ushered down a pathway that's truly destructive for our reputation. I mean, right now, people in those other countries that are about to experience a misery index because of what our executive branch did think that we co-sign that. They think that we, the American people, they think that we support that idea. They think we co-sign bombing schools with children in it. They think we have no remorse for those kinds of actions. Well, I'm here to tell you and everyone that's within the sound of my voice that, we are citizens of the world too, right? We love our children just like you love your children, and we don't want to see any harm come to them. And so we, the American people, are going to provide a demonstration to the world of how we really feel.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, when you mentioned about, there's a media attempt to make it seem like there's some segregation or polarizing events. Now, there's two things that's been going on right now in the ethers, which is one is this Louisiana case with the voting rights, and then there's this new bill that's looking to dismantle the tribal, disenfranchise the tribal and women-owned small businesses. Now, before I get into the federal contracting perspective of the women-owned and tribal, does the Louisiana voting right case, does it affect what's going on in federal contracting? Does it have any correlation?
Yeah, it does. It may not have an immediate correlation, but it has a downrange correlation, because if the expected outcome results in a particular party, right, being able to stack the deck, that means that only, their programs, statutes, and procedures will prevail, and they will be able to pick the winners and losers. Right. And so from a contracting perspective, what we see out of this administration, which I think is bass backwards in this centralizing of contracting thing and the disenfranchisement of so many small businesses, we're going to see those kinds of actions that come from the winners and losers. So, yeah, there is a downstream consequence for the contractors from this, I want to say ass backwards decision as it relates to the Voters' Rights Act, because, the thesis, right, the underlying rationale for why the Voters' Rights Act was put in place, the justices who rolled it back, they just completely ignored that. And the concern that I have, as they ignored this seminal civil right foundational legislative component, is the fact that they probably will go out and gut the rest of the Civil Rights Act, right? They will gut the rest of the protections that were designed to stop disenfranchisement of parts of our citizenry. And so, I'm on record as saying maybe it is time for us to throw out the Civil Rights Act. Maybe we should test that premise, right? Maybe we have arrived at a place as a nation to take care of our real citizens, right? And that's the human beings that make up the American population, right? Not looking at them from the perspective of their social costume, right? You got Black Americans and you got white Americans. No, we have human beings at the core. And above that, they're all citizens of these United States. And with that as a premise, we need human rights to make sure that we have fair and equal distribution of policies, resources, and authorities for the humans that make up our nation.
That's right. So do you think is this about politics, or is this about who control opportunity, or are we looking at something even more significant?
They always say follow the money. I mean, I hate to say it's as basic and as simple as that, right? This is about profit, right? This is about money, right? This is about winners and losers. My Bugatti's better than your Bugatti, right? This is all about things that truly don't matter, right? The things that are temporal, right? Not the things that are permanent. Yeah, that's what this is about. It's about money.
Okay. So just the basic foundation is that, and this goes back to that upper K and lower K, and them segregating that pretty much as they can. Is that what it really boils down to? Them just looking to create separation in between the wealth gaps?
Well, you say they and them, right? All my life, all my life, I've been hearing about they, right? They say you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water, right? Them said this, right? But you know what? I've never met they or them.
Yeah.
I've never met they or them, right? And so what we need at this particular point is we need to stop listening to they and them. We need to start establishing some critical thinking that lets us deduce the answer in the moment, right? One of the things that I love, and I keep looking around for it because I keep it close to me. This is my little book that my good friend Sophia Nelson wrote that focuses on redefining freedom. And the reason that is important to me is because it's at times like this that we need to come together and we need to redefine the things that work for us in the season that we're in. And so the young generation, your generation, needs to be empowered to call the question, will this work long term? Or will this work only for you? Because I'm inheriting this thing we call a nation. And so right now we need to have some communication and collaboration that's cross generation that produces a better outcome. And I'm in favor of the right tool for the right job. And so maybe we need to put in some reforms in our political systems that will allow us to have more younger representation in some of these decision-making areas, right? Maybe there needs to be term limits on the House and the Senate so that we don't have, 79, 89-year-old men and women dying in office, right, that don't know how to interface with ChatGPT, right? They can't program a VCR, right? Maybe we don't need to have lifetime appointments on the Supreme Court, right? Maybe there needs to be limits there. Maybe we need to look at the, ethical foundation and reforms and do what needs to be done in those areas. And let me be clear about something before we get this twisted, because I'm sure that I'll get some feedback on this, because they say he who is without sin can cast the first stone, right? So I'm a sinner from the beginner, right? So if you want to use one of those quiet packets where you're going to bring Mr. Cotton's history out and shame him, you ain't gonna do that, right? I'm a sinner from the beginner, and I've overcome by the grace of the Most High. And so what I'm saying to our nation is we need to take a look at these three fingers that are pointing back at us, and we need to do the internal work. We need to do the corrective action necessary to make sure that we're leaving the kind of an environment that can sustain human life. We're leaving the kind of communities and systems that can sustain the generations that are coming behind us. If we're not thinking in that interdependent, right, that collaborative kind of mindset, then we have a problem. We have a problem. NASA, that would be a problem.
Mm-hmm. So do you see that? Do you believe now we're demonstrating the collaboration of the younger generation and the older generation come together when we are on here, and then even what people don't see behind the camera, how we interface with each other every day, pretty much every day, and how we build together, and even with the rest of our tribe and nation. But outside of our community that we have, do you believe that? Do you think that's do you see the collaboration efforts of older generation and younger generation, or you think that's something that is rare in just in general? Like that's not something that's happening every day.
I see attempts at collaboration, but those attempts are things that, in my opinion, were organized by the powers that be and not organized by the communities that are interfacing with them. And so some of them have limited capability, limited influence. I'll give you an example of one of the areas that I'm aggressively concerned about, and that's that whole area of mentoring, which is basically what I think we're doing here. And the concern that I have is I always get these calls to come down to the local high school or the local middle school and be a mentor and grab some of these kids and put them under my wing to hopefully influence them. And I sit there and I look at that example and I say to myself, there's something flawed about that. And the thing that's flawed about that is the distance between where I am professionally and in my life and where that young man or woman is so far removed, they can't really even understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. I'm sharing a bunch of hopium with them. Whereas another type of mentoring configuration where, for example, I'm responsible for mentoring someone like yourself, right, who is 1 degree of separation removed from being exactly what I am. And then you be responsible for mentoring a college student, right, who has an interest in matriculating in the profession that you're operating within. And then that college student is responsible for mentoring a high school student, again, that's looking to matriculate in the same area. Now, the benefit for that change or shift is that you, right, get an opportunity to make an experiential decision as to whether or not this profession that you're going to tie your future to is something that really turns you on. And if you really get turned on from the inside, you'll have all of the energy necessary to do the study. I mean, your capabilities will break the bounds. But if you find out that you don't like this profession, right, at the earliest possible point, you have the ability to make a mid-course adjustment and go find that thing that you can be tuned in, tapped into, and turned on by.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens at every layer of this chain. And my humble hallucination is that if you organically incentivize an individual, we don't have to go through all of the other efforts, right, of trying to give them trophies and these kinds of things. They're going to naturally be motivated to do what's necessary to acquire the outcome. And so that's an example of how we can reimagine these systems that currently are being employed in our community, being employed within our institutions that were not designed for our communities. They weren't designed for our institution. We have the power. The beautiful thing about us is that we live in a constitutional republic, right? That's the wild card, even in this whole Middle East situation, right? Because the one thing that we can do is we can make a difference. Where other nations can't, we can make a difference. And right now, the difference that I'm looking to make is to get our men and women out of harm's way, right? This was a backward effort that was inappropriately executed. And right now, we have a clear, sober read of a constitutional document that says, at a minimum, there should be communication of what the intention is. The executive branch needs to communicate what the intention is. And if the executive branch doesn't have the ability to make that communication, Congress needs to step in, right? There's clear opportunity to do that. And so the fact that the executive branch is, doing their kabuki dance, right, trying to save face, and the Congress is mute on this matter is a problem. That means that we, the people, need to step up to the plate and cause them to take the action, because God forbid something untoward happen to one of those ships of ours blockade in the Gulf of Hormuz. Shouldn't even be there, but God forbid something happened to them. That would be a price to be paid by every elected official in these United States.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, we got a couple minutes. I just wanted to touch on it, and then there'll be a good follow-on conversation we can have for tomorrow. But you said, I believe this was early as last year, or even maybe before the year before last, that they were going to attack the woman-owned small business, that the woman-owned small business was in jeopardy. You said that early as, and you also said that maybe we should relook at the way the SBA program has been administered as well. Now we fast forward to right now today, the woman-owned small business and the tribal concerns are in threat. Now, what signal does that send? What should that signal send to everybody in this federal contracting ecosystem? If the big tribal concern, the big, large tribal players are now in threat, what is that saying?
It's saying that we need to stop allowing ourselves to be distracted by the event du jour, right? And we need to wake up and recognize that we have the power, right? We have Dorothy's ruby red slippers on. What we're dealing with in terms of the outcome of this disruption to our acquisition system came from that executive order shock and awe barrage that we got from this executive branch. And some systems and procedures or changes to systems and procedures were recommended that are just not in the best interest of this great nation. And I just don't think that the people that sat down and thought that process up were thinking about it from anything other than a corporate efficiency perspective, right? They were thinking of it from a standard perspective, but this is a government. This ain't a corporation, right? We're designed to spread these resources and not consolidate them into a few winners and losers. And so right now, what we're looking at is the outgrowth of the invisible hand, right, of big business, moving the cheese in such a way that they can more easily capture it, right? Because if you centralize contracting, right, you make it easier for someone to go in and pick up the bag. Right? And so I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but what was the question? Let me make sure I put a ribbon on that one.
Yes, sir. What the event that's going on with the tribals being disenfranchised, women-owned small business, what does that mean for the federal contract environment as a whole?
Yeah, and it means that, you know, actions are being implemented to forever change our acquisition approach that is going to disenfranchise women-owned small businesses, that is going to disenfranchise our minority, our socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. And you have to ask yourself, you know, what's going to be the absorption, right? Who is going to absorb all of that stuff that gets shaken out of the woman-owned small business program? Who's going to absorb all of that stuff that gets shaken out of the 8A program? Well, I'll tell you what the intention is, right? If you look at the $315 trillion worth of consolidation and bundling that went on as a result of this executive order, where a number of those requirements have now been bundled and cobbled together in such a way that small businesses can't compete for them, right? You've got to be a other than small business to even participate in the party. And so what they have done is they've changed the game. They've changed the game. And the problem with them changing the game in this way, there was no change in the theater that justified this change in the game. There was no material justification for this change in the game. And so what I'm suggesting is that we implement a change in the theater by causing we the people to have direct conversations with our congressional people and identify the who's who, right? Who's on the budget committee, right? Who's on the finance committee, right? Right? Who's on the procurement committee, right? And understand, because it's supposed to be transparent. Understand the bills and statutes that these people are looking to implement, and we weigh in on whether or not those things are appropriate for these United States. You know, those mechanisms are built into our constitutional republic. Well, damn it, it's time for us to start using it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And guys, the first demonstration that we are showing ourselves is that you guys go out and ask your Congress to co-sponsor these two bills, Contract Our Veterans Act and the Veteran Member Business Loan Act, and also ask them to rein in what's going on in the Middle East. And that's the first demonstration that we're showing to ourselves that we do have the power, guys. And on that note, same place, same time tomorrow as we continue this conversation. I am Ratuan Hill, and that is the Mr. Walter Cotton III. Until next time, guys.